back with another one. It's the Dream Shakerz podcast. I'm your host, George Nunez, alongside with my co-host,
Upon Odom.
And today we're bringing you episode 41 with a special guest, Ivelyse Andino, the founder and CEO of Radical Health, which is a minority woman-owned social enterprise that utilizes AI-enabled tech to help provide or to help people understand their healthcare rights. She also serves as the New York City Commissioner of Gender Equity, and prior to her involvement at Radical Health, she was a member of the NYC Maternal Mortality and Morbidity Review Committee and a 2019 Roddenberry Fellow. Welcome to the pod, Ivelyse.
Yay. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. How are you feeling this morning? How's or afternoon, I should say. It's morning for Steph. He's on the West Coast, but how's everything with you this morning?
I'm feeling good. I wanted to start here with a little year. It's very Bronx heavy.
Yeah. Can we take this time to do something very important? I think you hit it on the head. We gotta pay homage. We gotta pay respect. So can we take the time to throw the X up one more time? Can we do that, South Bronx, or for the Bronx in general? It has done so much for us in terms of culture. There's so many people, so many greats that paved the way for us to be where we are today. So let's start there, because I know you come from humble beginnings. I know it wasn't easy to make it out the trenches. So how was it growing up in the X?
Can I say that I'm still growing up in the X?
Absolutely. and talk about that Afro-Latino background. That's key too. You got to touch it.
Yeah. So born and raised in the Bronx. Everywhere I go, I'm still growing in the Bronx. I still live here, so it's still home. It is where Radical Health is headquartered. And I think all of that is really intentional. I often talk about my work, and I think that's important, right? But the reality is, like, my work wouldn't happen if it wasn't for the Bronx, and if it wasn't from my experiences living here. And so I think we hear a lot about the drama. We hear a lot about, like, what we see on the news, the Bronx is burning. And I think we have a really bad rep, but I don't know that we talk often about the beauty, the magic, the community that is the Bronx. And I think that's a lot of what has shaped me and still shapes me. So both my parents lived here, I'm here. I identify as Black Latina, from Puerto Rico. And growing up, you learn how to make it. You learn that, there's going to be things that are structural, things that, like, whether it's like getting into school. I used to joke, it's not a joke, but I used to change my address on my resume and change it to say, like, New York, or Mott Haven, so that I could get a job interview. And those are, like, really real things that you learn how to navigate. And then there's, like, the soft stuff, right? Like how to kick it with friends and how to switch up, when I'm with my Latina crew, when I'm with my Black crew. You learn how to build community, you learn how to be in community. And I think what's most important is that you learn then how to, like, thrive in it.
And before I pass it off to Steph, I wanted to touch on this a bit briefly, or add on to what you're saying, because this is crucial, right? I think it's important. Let's talk about identity and what does being Puerto Rican or Afro-Latino or Latina mean to you, right? Because there's talks and rumors saying, like, oh, Puerto Ricans are losing their culture. Like, it's a U.S. territory. Puerto Ricans don't grow up speaking Spanish now. Like, what does it mean being Puerto Rican to you?
We hitting hard early. To be Puerto Rican is something that I am incredibly proud of. What most folks don't know is that, technically it's called a commonwealth, right? But it's essentially a modern day colony. We pay taxes, right? But we don't really have, like, representation. The things that happen on the island, right? And especially now with, like, tax havens, it is really an atrocity. The way that the island is being treated. The other thing, you know, to be Puerto Rican is to be from a culture that is really rich, that is rooted in activism, is rooted in fighting for our rights. What most people might not know either is that it used to be illegal to fly the Puerto Rican flag. And there was a bunch of stuff that went down, you know, wars, legit lives lost. So if you ever wonder why people are so proud to be Puerto Rican, it's because there was a moment where we couldn't be proud. So to be Puerto Rican, and then to also be Afro-Latina, where my dad is Puerto Rican and Black, my mom is Puerto Rican and brown, you can say, and to have those two kind of cultures come together, you know, there's a truth that, right, like in I think in most Latinx cultures, there's colorism, and that is very true. And I've experienced both sides of that. So my mom's side of the family, I was the darker one, on my dad's side of the family, I'm the lighter one. And in many ways, right, it is to bring all of that. And so to be Puerto Rican, to be from the Bronx as well, where I wasn't necessarily born on the island. I keep joking that my Spanish is real ratata, like Cardi B says. It is something that, you know, it's just intersectionality, right? I can see both sides, but I'm very, very proud to be from Puerto Rico. I'm very, very proud to be Afro-Latina. I'm really honored too that I have a platform that I can talk about these things, because growing up, I didn't have anyone who looked like me in these roles. I didn't have folks like you to look at, to chat with. And so it really is a sense of pride, but also a real sense of honor.
Given all of these cultural influences, given your origins here in the Bronx, your ties to the borough, you know, what ultimately led to this decision to get started with Radical Health, right? Like to move forward with this concept. How did you identify this as like a problem area that needed a solution?
Yeah, so it was interesting because I worked in healthcare, right? So I had dreams of getting out the hood. I had dreams of making a lot of money and moving to Westchester with a dog and a fence and, you know, doing boss moves. And, you know, more or less, I'm really determined and driven. I was on my way. So I started working in corporate America, working in healthcare, and it was bomb. I was doing it. But what happened for me was I was making the money. I was in places that I never imagined that I could be. And my mom got sick. And it was the first time that I realized, oh my, like I could be in these places. I could make all the money. I know all the people. I know all the content and the knowledge. But when my mom was sick, I didn't really know how to help her. She was in a Bronx hospital, and it felt really, just really hard and lonely and scary. And it reminded me, and I talked earlier about like changing my like not saying the Bronx, right? And changing my resume, but it reminded me like, oh yeah, I could do all the things and change all the things and shape shift, right? But this healthcare system, like it's hard and it's broken and there aren't really many hacks to get through it. And so for me, that was like the first moment. And then I got into tech because I was like, all right, like I'm going to double down on this career move. I'm going to like do this for the people now. And I was doing tech. I was creating apps that let, you know, doctors use apps and do all these really cool things in healthcare. But I was the only woman. I was the only person of color. I was the youngest. And I was making millions of dollars for other people. But my community and communities like mine didn't have access to what we now know today is like digital health, right? And like the fact that you could like FaceTime a doctor, like we didn't have any of that. This was years ago. And so it was those kind of like experiences that I like worked through, but also the things I saw on the block and in my community and with my family and my friends that led me to start Radical Health. And I think the piece that often, you know, that also inspired me was looking at how there were groups like the Black Panthers and the Young Lords who had been organizing around health. And what, again, there's like a bunch of fun facts, but when we look at, you know, free food, free school lunches, right? That was organized by the Black Panthers. When we look at lead tests, and y'all know, like, you know, you can't eat lead paint. I don't know if you remember, like when I was a kid, it was like, don't eat the paint because it has lead in it. But when we look at like lead regulations that happened in New York, but across the country, it was the Young Lords who were going door to door. They actually stole medical supplies and maybe got them donated or liberated them, we'll say. They liberated medical supplies so that they could test kids for lead, and they went door to door testing. So when we start to look at even some of the policies that we see and the things that we benefit from today, and there's so much more, it was really like groups like the Young Lords and the Black Panthers that organized and started to change health. And so those were kind of the basis. That was the basis for me thinking about radical health and what were we going to do to, one, stand on the shoulders of the people before us, but two, kind of take this to the next level.
On that concept of, what were we going to do? We also understand that radical health isn't a one-person show, right? Like there's a broader group that you have around you, right? So what was that process of getting all of those individuals together and moving forward with this mission? It's a woman-owned enterprise. That's a big deal.
Yeah. What does Nicki Minaj? Nicki Minaj says, it's not me, it's we. And that couldn't be truer. So at its core, so I founded the company. I am a solo founder. So I started this, incorporated it on my own. But the reality is that I knew that when I was starting this, I didn't want to do what many people do, which is go into a conference room, build with their friends in downtown Manhattan, create solutions and say, all right, now here you go. This is what you got. But I really wanted to build with community. And so I started at my dining room table. I invited everyone I could meet. If I saw you on the street, I was like, yeah, you want to come through? And just for context, I live in the South Bronx. So, but I was like, yo, you want to come through and let's have a conversation around health at my table. I got wine. And that's how we started, just talking with people about what they would dream about, not just what you need, because I think that's one thing, but also what do you want, right? What do you wish for around health, especially? And it was those early conversations that got us started. And it's those early conversations that are what we still do today. So we still get to have conversations, and we facilitate conversations with community members using circle practice, where people can talk about their health experiences. They can talk about, why they might be on the fence about vaccinations, or what it's like to get a job and get that big old packet where you got to pick your insurance and be like, oh, I don't know, right? And then still have conversations with us using our chat, where you can know what questions to ask, right? And know your rights around health, and know and be prepared. So in many ways, again, it's not me, it's we, and we still kind of do that today.
I think we need to slow down here, because we just went all in. And so just for the people that don't know, what is radical health specifically? And the follow-up question to Steph's point, because, building that team, right? What does marketing and brand awareness looks like for you in radical health? Only because I'm sure that there's just a lot of people in the hood that probably don't know what radical health is, and they should. So we'll love to hear your perspective on that, Ivelyse.
Yeah. So, at Radical Health at its core, we know that healthcare is scary. It's complicated. It is overwhelming. Doesn't really matter how smart you are, how much money you make. Right now there are 77 million adults who don't have basic understanding of healthcare, right? And again, that doesn't matter. Beyonce is an example, as is Serena Williams. Doesn't matter. It is just complicated. And so because it's complicated, you ask less questions. You don't really know. I know myself, it's a little bit of when you go into the doctor, it's yeah, sure. Just am I good? Get me out of here. And so I saw that, and really Radical Health exists as a way. And what we do is we hold conversations, and we use meaningful conversations to change kind of the way we engage with healthcare, and to really look at, health justice. And so we do that through our platform, which lets you join in to conversations that are happening, whether with peers, really. So with, could be your neighbors, could be your colleagues at work, and to have these conversations around your health or around topics. Maybe it's grief, maybe it's just COVID. And then we support those conversations with the chat app that you can text us and ask your questions, and get really prepped and get questions that you could ask while you're at a doctor's appointment, or maybe while you're in the emergency room. So a really good example of what that might look like is, most people don't know that you don't have to be your translator for your grandparents, right? You can ask for professional translation service. And that is like legally provided in every hospital across the United States, that you can get some kinds of translation services. You can ask for a second opinion, and it's not going above your doctor's head, or it's not, there are things that you can do to feel more empowered. And obviously, depending on the situation, there are things that you might want to know. So as we think about radical health, that's kind of what we do today. To your second question around like team and what does it look like to build this out? I'll say we want people to know about this, right? So marketing and all those things. I mean, building a team and starting a company is a lot. But what we really thrive on right now is really conversations like this, working with our community. We're hiring and we're growing. And as a company, it's really exciting to be in this moment right now, where if you had asked me 2 years ago, most folks wouldn't be ready to have the conversation around like healthcare and the complications. But because we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? This is real for all of us. Like, what's a vaccine? What's a COVID test? What's a rapid test? We've all been there. It is a lot. And I think right now, we're really uniquely positioned to do this together.
And following up on that platform, because you spoke about it extensively, what did it take for you to build out this AI platform? I know it must have took months, especially being a solo founder.
Yeah, I mean, right, the reality is like, this kind of splits into two ways, right? There's business talk, and then there's like, like how I did it as a founder. The reality is, I have a team. We have a great team of developers who built this. We actually built it really fast. So we knew COVID was hitting. We had a different kind of platform that we were getting ready to launch. And last March, we worked really closely with developers, and in 3 months, we turned out this new product. What I will say is, for folks listening, it's still kind of in beta, we'll say, or it's with our clients right now. We haven't made it available. So like, you can't download it right now, but it's coming soon. And that's some of the stuff that we're working on this year to get this ready so that folks, because we know people need it. We know that it's like important. I mean, I get texts on my personal phone now, folks asking me, and helping. So we're working really, really hard to get that ready to be rolled out next year.
So you've given us some background about the concept, about the product, about your origins. So let's dive into another aspect on your narrative, right? And we're going to still stay on the topic of radical health, but we understand that this next question is often one of concern for every founder, right? And it's, what was the process like of raising capital for your startup?
Well, so when I started Radical Health, and we're a little different than most startups. So we're 5 years old. Started this, started with the idea in 2015, and then we incorporated in 2016. So it's been a minute. I went out, I come from 2 previous tech startups, health tech startups. I was like ready. I was like, yo, I'm gonna raise this money and I'm gonna do this. I didn't know then what I know now was that, Black Latinx women are funded with 0.01% of funding. Like basically it's non-existent. And so I went out trying to get some checks and no one would invest in me. They were like, well, build a product, or, oh, get some customers. And I was like, yo, like everyone else is getting funded with just an idea. Like, why aren't you funding me? And it basically, forced me to bootstrap. So I was like, all right, cool. And I talked earlier about how the Bronx, right? It shows you how to like build and how to like, when there are things that say no, you learn how to do it anyway. So I was like, all right, cool. I'm going to do this. Watch. So I started, figuring out how to fund my company without capital. And that's what I did for the last 5 years. What I will say is that it worked. I figured it out, found some clients who were willing to pay us, we use that really to sustain ourselves. This year, we decided to go the investment route. And so I think we have enough traction. We've done enough. We really proven out that this is valuable and right? Investable. And so started raising capital earlier this year. And I think, the journey there, and I say this especially for anyone who's listening, if you are Black, Brown, Latinx, immigrant, justice involved, or have had experiences with the justice system, undocumented. No, it's really hard because people don't tell you or give you the playbook. I often say that I'm playing a game that I don't know the rules to. And I feel like a ping pong ball sometimes. I'm just like trying to bot back and forth and make my way. But what I've learned is one that, like, your ideas, especially if they're rooted in your lived experience and this, and it's for your community and you're doing what you're doing, like, your ideas are not wrong. You're just early. And as you think about raising, there's just like a lot of unsaid rules. So it was challenging, really challenging, but thank God I've been surrounded by great mentors, great advisors, great investors who are like pulling me to the side and are like, all right, bet, here's game, here's how you play it, and here's how you go. And some of it is just even learning how to talk about my company differently, not changing anything about my company, but just learning how to present it. So all in all, I think this round of funding has been a little easier. It's been a little easier because now it's also on my terms, and I'm able to be really bold and unapologetic about what Radical Health does, bold and unapologetic about who I am. I show up like this everywhere. So if you catch me on the block, you're gonna find this. If you catch me in an investor room, this is it too, for better or worse. And so it's made at least this experience, it's still tough, but it's made it a little bit more easy. It's made it easier. I'm not like hiding or camouflaging or trying to like fit into something that wasn't really for me anyway.
I feel like I gotta ask you this question, right? Just because you're in healthcare, we all three of us on this current episode know how convoluted and complex that healthcare system is and what it could be. Talk about the lack of access of healthcare, especially in these Black and Latino communities, because like there was one time when I was helping out in terms of like getting people COVID tested right up all throughout the Bronx, whether it was like Fordham, Third Ave, Hunts Points, and I kind of knew this, but it was interesting to see in live time how many people don't have healthcare insurance when that should be like a universal right? So what are your thoughts on like people just not having that access to healthcare insurance, and also not having access to healthy foods, since we're on the topic of health, right? Every corner we see the chicken spots, the liquor stores, the bodegas, but we don't really see the salads and the smoothies bars, especially in the Bronx. We don't see that enough.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna come out the gate with this one. When we think about access to healthcare, it's actually not lack of access, it's institutionalized racism that we are seeing and experiencing. It's not that people don't want healthcare, and it's not for lack of access, right? New York City, one of the largest employers of New York City is actually the healthcare system and hospitals. In the Bronx in particular, right, the number one employer, hospitals. When we look at food access, in the Bronx in particular, we are actually home to the Hunts Point Market, which actually distributes all of the fresh foods for all of New York City. So it's not that we don't have access, it's there, right? But when we look at, how people can qualify for health insurance. Right now you have to be under a certain income to qualify for Medicaid or Medicare. Cool. If you are let's say you have a job, I'm a startup founder. I make a little bit more money than I did when, I wasn't working at all. I don't make nearly what I made at corporate. But then you're allowed to like buy health insurance on the exchange plan. Cool. You go on there and they charge you $700 a month for like pretty crappy insurance, high deductibles. And that really is unrealistic for most folks. So for a long time, honestly, for the last 4 years, I didn't have health insurance, and I work in healthcare and health justice, right? That's some of the stuff that we're talking about here. It's not access, it's systems that are in place that keep people out. The other piece is, that we see too, it's not that, people don't want to get care. And so let's say you go to the emergency room and let's say you need help. Those places aren't friendly. They aren't designed to like take into account the things that you might need. They're there to like patch you up sometimes, but we see a lot of things where people are turned away or where they're treated without dignity or respect. There have been plenty of times, and if, you can look at different cases, right? But around COVID, when we looked at how vaccines were rolled out, right? It was all online. You had to book online. My aunt is not going to go on the internet and book online to get a COVID vaccine. In fact, it was everyone from outside who was going on and snatching up the appointments, right? So when we look at how these things are rolled out, it's not that people don't want them. It's not that they don't know how. Sometimes it really is that there's systems and policies in place that are racist. And essentially the healthcare system is racist. And that's why we see a lot of what we see today.
Given the fact that you decided to move forward with the benefit corp framing for radical health, right? Like, how does some of that insight that you gained from your experience in government, right, thinking about other aspects of society outside of just, a business context, positively impact the way you guide and steer radical health as an organization?
Yeah, so I'd actually say that for me, it's the reverse. It's actually how I run radical health that helps me when I'm an advisor to government and on other boards. Being a founder, being the CEO, right? I get to set the terms for my company. I get to learn also really fast. So we make a ton of mistakes. I will say that out loud. We are not perfect. We're not perfect in the work that we do. We're not perfect in how we hire. Like, there's a ton of stuff that happens. What's really great is that I get to listen to that and I get to make changes fast, right? So if we're not paying people, according to like the market value, got that. I can make that change and make sure that we fix it right away. I also get to be really bold and brave and say things that most people don't want to hear and say it the way I want to say it. I don't have to worry about offending someone or, being told that I have a boss. And so what it's allowed me to do is that then take that to government and say, one, like, I can say what I want to say. If you don't like it, you're not my sole source of income. You're also not my sole source, right, of anything. In fact, I have a whole movement that I'm working on. So it's helped me do that. But I think it's also helped me in the reverse. I have learned, this is a long game. And I think what you learn a lot of in politics and in government is maybe don't burn all the bridges. That's a lesson that I'm still learning. I'm not very good at it. I burn them all. But that's something that I am learning about. How then do we build, and the reality is, like, no jokes. How do you build relationships even when you disagree or when something is, in opposition? And it doesn't mean that you have to concede. It doesn't mean that you have to, agree, but can we work together? Can we compromise? Or we can disagree, but let's still respect one another. And those are some of the things that I think are influencing me on the work side.
We're going to continue with this same framing of how you conduct business, right? Because I think what's interesting about health tech is that you're still dealing with incredibly sensitive data, right? Like, these are aspects about an individual's health makeup, right? And it has an additional level of weight that isn't necessarily present in other industries, right? So what are the ways at this moment that radical health actually generates profit?
Yes, I think what I'm hearing, I guess, there was a lead and then a question. So two different things. In terms of data and healthcare data, we do not collect any sensitive, like personally identifiable data. That's just not something that we do. We're not doing anything health related, like health in terms of like clinical health, right? So where others, maybe you're sharing your blood pressure or your medical records, we're not doing that. We're really just helping people know what questions, like how to navigate and know their rights around healthcare. So to that end, we have a great team and everything we do is secure and we use industry standards, but we're not collecting any clinical or any personal identifiable healthcare data. when we think about that of like how we make money, right? And how we sustain that, we have clients. So our clients are public health departments, our employers, who realize that, they're having a hard time reaching certain communities. They're having a hard time, right? When you think about people who don't necessarily engage or trust really the healthcare system, that's Radical Health's sweet spot. We get to work with people who are like, nah, not really with it. Because what we do is we meet folks where they are, we build community, and we help people know a little bit more and feel empowered and have really self-determination in their own healthcare journey. So our clients are those public health departments who want to reach out to a certain set of patients, employers who say, hey, I have employees who, we want to make sure that they're well, and a pizza party and like a massage is all right, but we want to make sure that they actually have, again, a say and are empowered in their health. We work with government, so like public health departments, insurance companies, and basically really supporting folks who want to look at healthcare and really support, you can call them patients or people, in their journey towards health justice.
And quick question, what has been the response of some of the people who have been able to use this platform this far? Like, have they received it well? Have they provided any user feedback? Have they enjoyed it a lot? Have they been a bit uncomfortable? What has that been like this far?
Yeah. So, I mean,
and one other question, are you able to see like the demographics of like who's using the platform and from what location? Like, is it the South Bronx? Is it Harlem? Is it, in different spaces? Just would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. So, what I think it's important to know, so 98% of our users, anyone who's ever engaged with Radical Health, they identify as Black, Latino, people of color, immigrant. So that's like our demographic, right? This isn't your typical health tech startup. Like, we're working with folks, right, who are in it. And then 98% of those folks, right, also live in high concentration areas of poverty. So to your point, Georgia, like we measure everything by zip code. We do a lot of work in New York City across the boroughs, specifically the Bronx, Brownsville and Brooklyn, Washington Heights, East Harlem, Flushing, Queens. So we do segment by zip code. We also have folks in Tacoma, Washington that we work with, in Washington State. And then more recently, especially this last year, we've done everything virtually. So we're all online, but we've expanded kind of across the country. So we have some folks in Florida, we have some folks in Chicago, California and Oakland, Philadelphia. So we really have started, spreading out a bit. And then when we think about what people say, we get a ton of like messages, and largely, most folks, like 96% of folks, right, would recommend Radical Health to a friend or a family member. We know that people feel like they learn something new. And for many folks, it's the first time they've ever been able to have an honest conversation, right, about their health, or the first time they've felt like prepared and supported before an appointment. I often say that, like, if I'm going to a restaurant, like, I'll look at the menu before I go. I know kind of what's on there. The same thing for, like, if I'm going to watch a movie, I'm on Netflix for hours being like, all right, let me look at this preview. Let me see. All right, what do I need? Setting stuff up. Often we show up at the doctor like, hey, what's up? And we don't put in enough, we don't put in work or no. And a lot of that is, again, is not because of our own faults. It's because it's complicated and we don't know where to go. So really, people feel supported. They feel empowered. They feel like they're not alone. And then they feel like they actually, have some control and have some say in how they experience their health.
At the current moment, it appears that Radical Health is leveraging a mix of both like in-person services and also this AI offering. When you initially created the company, or when you were devising product, right, why did you think it was important to have a mix of both in-person services and digital product?
Yeah, so what's important to know is, like, now everything that we're doing is online. So we're 100% like an online tech platform where you could still have these conversations and still chat with folks. We call it the IRL, right? So you think about like the real time, kind of what we're doing here, and how everyone is experiencing Zoom. And then you think about, right, the offline, right? The URL. It's like what you're Googling at midnight when you can't sleep and you're like, well, let me ask, right? And those are two very different experiences. What I share here is going to be very different than what I'm Googling at midnight. And so for us, it was just really important to know that people, especially when it comes to your health, need different ways of engaging, right? There's what I'm going to be bold enough to like share and maybe want to share with people. And then there's going to be the stuff that like I might be too embarrassed or too ashamed or too scared to ask and would rather engage one-on-one. And so for us, that mix of like analog and digital is what for us is our secret sauce, really, because if we're talking about the crews and the people that we want to talk with, the communities that we're working with, you know, there's really no other way to have meaningful conversations, to build trust, really, and to build trust at scale.
Wow. Well, you provided so many gems and jewels today. We truly appreciate you. But we couldn't let you be and let you go without asking you this final question. Here at Dream Shakers, we're all about paying it forward. So what are the 3 pieces of advice Ivelyse would give to her younger self?
Ooh, all right. 3 pieces of advice for my younger self. One would be that you don't wait for anybody to tell you no. Don't be afraid of people telling you no, like ask anyway. And yeah, don't say no to yourself right before someone else says no to you. The second piece of advice would be to take up all the space. Like, do not play small to make other people feel comfortable. Do not hold back to make other people feel safe. Like, take up all the space. And the third would be to have fun, and that life is so much more than work. It is so much more than what you produce. It's all the in-between moments, all the laughs, the stories, the memories with friends and family member. And like, that's like the most important one. So to put that above everything else.
That concludes the episode. We appreciate your time, Ivelyse. Thank you so much for coming by and educating us as well as our audience about radical health. And we look forward to having you on future episodes, because it's just, you know, we can't take your game and you, granted, we want to give your flowers while you're here and while you deserve it. And you are truly a dream shaker. Thank you for paving the way for young entrepreneurs like ourselves to keep threading the needle and pushing the agenda forward. So we appreciate you again.
Thank you so much.